One day, as Cynthia returned home from the hair salon to take off her shoes, she suddenly felt that her body had become so weak and skinny. She felt her waist being 5 or 15 centimeters smaller than it was moments before. Her body felt tired and weak with no strength, even though she had eaten a lot earlier. As she glanced to the clock, it was already 12 o'clock, which was usually the time she exchanged her weight for money. Even though she didn't exchange her weight for money at that moment, she could feel the exact same sensation of experiencing it. Cynthia had to consider everything to realize what was actually happening. She quickly went to the private room where a lot of the money was summarily scattered on the floor. Could this mean that the scale started to function on its own behalf without her even standing on it? She thought fearfully. The next day, Cynthia finally had a date with David. She arrived early but kept thinking about the scale operating out of her control. As Cynthia was worrying, a hand touched her shoulder. 10 to 1, it was David. He finally seemed to have succumbed to the instant beauty and wealth of Cynthia. David charmed Cynthia with the sweet romantic words. He affectionately held Cynthia's hands too. The two became official, exactly what Cynthia had obsessed about for so long. Cynthia decided to invite David over to her place. Desiring to take control of David, she drew him into a trap she planned in order for him to never leave her. She then seduced him to accompany her home. This was beyond David's expectations since it was only their first date. Of course, he was eager and immediately accepted Cynthia's offer. It was a joyous night for Cynthia. Her only wish was to forever lay in the arms of her lover without having to think or worry about anything else. Suddenly, Cynthia became worried about the magical weight scale and that it would unexpectedly function again and deplete the nutrients from her body just like before. Cynthia hurriedly got out of bed and rushed to the well-locked private room to see. She had no idea that David was awake when she left her room. Cynthia tried to adjust the arrow to its lowest level, but somehow she felt like her body had already dropped a few kilograms. It appeared that the machine already worked on its own behalf in order to transfer weight for money. From then on, she continued to become thinner and thinner. Cynthia tried to balance it by eating more and even turned to alternative medications. Unfortunately, the amount of weight she would gain was not even 1/10 of the weight that has been taken by the weight scale. The scale became more and more out of control and soon Cynthia only weighed 35 kilograms. Tremendous amounts of money covered the floor, but she was in no mood to collect it. Cynthia came up with an extremely dangerous solution. The next day, Cynthia went to a beauty specialist to try and transfer fat into her body. Cynthia demanded that the doctor perform fat transfer on her. The doctor refused to operate as he pointed out how dangerous the operation could be based on her current condition. Her chances of survival would be extremely low. As the doctor rejected her, Cynthia could not contain her anger. She smashed her bony hands on the table and shouted loudly at the doctor, demanding to have the surgery immediately. Against this better judgment, the doctor eventually had to agree to perform the operation. The operation was conducted successfully and luckily Cynthia survived. Hours later, she left the facility. Despite being implanted with quite a lot of fat, she was still in danger as it would not be enough to even help her make the weight as the weight scale increased its intensity. On her way home, Cynthia received a text message from David. The two of them haven't seen each other for more than a week since their first date. David constantly texted her, eager to see her again, but Cynthia was afraid to be seen on her deteriorating condition. Fearing that David will leave her, Cynthia texted him back saying she needed some time to rest, but what she really needed was more time to sort out her problem. 3 days later, Cynthia had to go back to the beauty spa to implant more fat. She started to look more like a moving skeleton. The doctor was stunned by her appearance. He couldn't understand how she could become so much thinner so soon, and wondered how she lost all the fat implanted on her. Nothing seemed to be falling in place for Cynthia. That evening, David went to Cynthia's house. He begged her to open the door for him. Cynthia tried to avoid being seen, and she tried to avoid seeing him, and she didn't want David to see her looking this awful. Stubbornly, David continuously insisted on seeing her. Having no other choice, Cynthia opened the door for him. As the door opened, David entered. His face went completely dark as he witnesses the sight of the once beautiful Cynthia. She was extremely withered, her body all skin and bone with large scary blisters all popping out all over her body. The pimple on her neck looked infected. Cynthia surprised, David didn't seem to be scared or stop his advancement towards her. David said no matter how she looked like, he still loved her. The sweet words moved Cynthia to tears of happiness which started running down her cheeks. There had never been anyone who treated her with such sincerity and warmth. It seemed like David was trying to motivate Cynthia to keep fighting the situation. Cynthia hugged David, but unbeknown to her, behind his face was an evil smile. As you know, David originally didn't have any feelings for Cynthia. He was actually just using her. After their warm embrace, he immediately asked to borrow a large sum of money from her. Infatuated and gullible, Cynthia gave him her safe lock code and told David that he could use as much money as he wanted, but his ambitions was 1,000 times bigger than that. As it happened, David accidentally found out about the existence of the spooky skill. He knew well how much money it could make him. His intentions was to take advantage of Cynthia's weight loss problem so he could take the money for himself. It turned out that it was exactly what he thought. Cynthia had placed all her money in the safe. She was totally unaware of David's plan. He comforted her, saying that he would stay with her that night while Cynthia entered the bathroom. David decided to make his move. David sneaked into the secret room where the weight scale was placed. He retained his memories of that night Cynthia tried to use the weight scale, and he remembered how to use it. As Cynthia was still in the bathroom, dreaming about her future life with the love of David, her face suddenly went pale. She then experienced the sensation the scale gave her as it stripped off weight, but she realized it was not happening at the exact time it usually did. While Cynthia was still confused, not knowing what was happening to her, an extremely painful feeling immediately hit her as if she had just lost about 10 kilograms. Cynthia's body at this time was nothing but a skeleton covered with a skin. She became exhausted but still tried to open the bathroom door and kept calling out to David. But as soon as she approached the door, she collapsed onto the floor due to exhaustion. With the little strength left, she reached for the door. And as the door opened, Cynthia was shocked to see David standing next to the weight scale. She even experienced unbelievable emotional hurt as she then realized what was happening. But by that time, she saw his true colors. It was too late. As Cynthia was gasping for air, David was busy counting the money in front of him. Turned out that everything was part of David's plan to pay out a huge debt that he had accumulated. The people he borrowed from were very aggressive as he couldn't pay off his debts. He had been beaten and assaulted. David had only 3 days to pay his debt. If he didn't do this, they will end him. With the intention of taking over the money as well as using Cynthia to make money from the scale, David was comforted that Cynthia's situation would be the best fit for his problem. The weight scale was a cursed magical item that he was aware of, and it turned out that it was part of an evil plan he arranged to make it fall in the hands of Cynthia. All along, David was behind everything. Because of greed and a blind love for David, Cynthia paid the price. Might this story serve as a warning to all of us that wealth, beauty, and obsessions can destroy us not only externally but also from within. please consider subscribing to my channel. Don't forget to click the notification button. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. This greatly encourages me to do more videos like this. Catch you up in the next one.